So first off, thank you so much to XDS Spark for hosting this webinar. XDS Spark is the premium solution for the game development and creative industries in providing that one-stop global database of service providers for buyers to help you meet your business and production goals. So thank you to them so much for hosting this webinar today. Also, if you're not familiar with XDS. XDS is the External Development Summit. It happens every year in Vancouver, and it's the only international games industry event with the primary focus on advancing external development. And it'll be in September this year, from September 2nd to 5th. And it's an absolutely gorgeous hotel in Vancouver. We're going to be sharing so many great insights, presentations, table topics on external development, how to advance your practices. And there's also some fantastic networking opportunities for you there as well to meet with developers and publishers and service providers alike. So we look forward to seeing you all there. And if you're interested in attending, you can go visit the XDS website for more information. So we're going to be focusing on the XDS Insights report for this webinar. We're talking about strategic moves in a cautious market, and we're going to be looking at some of the key takeaways from the XDS Insights report. And if you want to follow along with us as we talk through the report, you can feel free to download that now from the XDS website as well. Okay, so without further ado, we've got a good amount of people starting to drop in now. So thank you, everyone. We'll start off by introducing our panel. I'll give you a quick intro on me to start with. My name is Carla Rylance. I am the chair of the XDS Advisory Committee, and I am the head of business solutions at XDS Spark. I am located in Vancouver, Canada. And I'm happy to introduce you to our panel. We have some great experts in the house for you today, both on the developer publisher side and the service provider side. We will first start with Dave Lamb, who was the author of this year's Insights report.
All right, intro done. NetEase. I'm with NetEase. I'm executive producer for North America. I run an insourcing and outsourcing group that support first-party studios. So that's me. Been a part of the XDS advisory board for 7-8 years now, so it's been a while. I've been to every single XDS conference, so Chris has not got rid of me yet. So that's me.
That's impressive. Thanks, Dave. I'll pass the mic to Abby as well. She's a past author of the Insights report too.
Yes. Thank you, Carla. My name is Abby Canavese. I am the Co-Development Success Manager Director, and I am working at Virtuos for 7 years now, and I am based in Vancouver as well. Good to be here.
Perfect. Thank you, Abby. I'm going to pass the mic now to Marley as well. She is on a central team for external development at EA, and she's going to be a fantastic person to help us deep dive this data that we have in the report. Go ahead, Marley.
Oh my goodness, no pressure. Thank you, Carla. So hi, I'm Molly McGehee. I am the department head of XDI at EA, as Carla mentioned. I personally am based in Orlando, but we are a global team that supports all regions across EA. So we have people in a lot of different locations around the world.
Thank you, Molly. And we also have Nigel as well, who is joining us. Nigel is on our diversity subcommittee for XDS, and he is a keen contributor for our XDS events as well. Go ahead, Nigel.
Good morning and afternoon, everybody. My name is Nigel Franks. I'm the studio director of production at Snowed-In Studios in beautiful Ottawa, Canada. I saw somebody in chat and I recognized somebody saying hi from Ottawa, so it's great to see our hometown represent. Been with Snowed-In Studios, a part of Keyword Studios, since 2019, and I heard this great line from a colleague of mine at another studio say that they've been doing games since the 1900s, and I thought I was going to steal that.
Don't do that.
Ye oldie game development. Love it. Thank you, Nigel. And thanks everyone in the chat. Hello from Wigan, awesome. Montreal, Ottawa, Amsterdam, Brazil. We've got a great international audience. Thank you so much, everyone, for dropping in. Okay, So we're going to delve into the insights report now. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. Here we go. So yeah, as I said, if you haven't downloaded the report and you want to do so, go ahead and do that. I will share a few slides for you now. We're going to start looking at demand and spend to start with. So I'm going to show you a few snippets from the report. I wanted to share with you the data on slide 11. Focusing on the estimated annual spend on external development. As you see on this slide, we've started to see a slow increase in the amount being spent on external development, especially since the COVID boom. This chunk that's between like over $6 million, kind of from orange to purple, that has been increasing year over year. Which is quite extraordinary, really. And then I also wanted to quickly share this slide here on slide 33, which is highlighting here on the right-hand side the publisher perceived growth in demand for external services. And you'll notice that the 2025 bar, it's actually stating that the perceived demand has actually decreased since the previous year. And we found that kind of intriguing because we're spending more on external development year over year, and yet the perceived growth has actually decreased slightly. So I wanted to pose the question to this panel. What did you perceive of those data points? And since the data was collected, like December, January, just gone, have you observed any changes in the industry which would make us perceive that data in a different way? Does anyone want to contribute to that question?
I can start. So I think that one of the things is, as we all know, we're kind of still in this process of this rebalance, right? We know that we're right in the thick of this, call it a downturn, call it volatility in the market. And I think we know that games are still being made. There's still ever increasing demand for games, but the perception could be due to people think, you know, they're looking to see what more is going to happen, you know, with project cancellations and things of the like. And so I think that's impacting the perception about demand, just because it's not that the player appetite for games has gone down, and that when games are being made, that, you know, it's going to potentially require less external partnerships. It's just, well, if the games, the projects themselves are getting canceled or getting kind of rethought, then we might not see, you know, we might see some slowdown, and maybe some games are coming out later, you know, than we had anticipated. I mean, we are seeing some cancellations, and I think we're all very much acutely aware of that. And so, you know, in that vein, spend is high because the games that are being made are spending a lot. But then I think maybe in answering that question, some people are taking into consideration just some games that are not getting made and how that's impacting demand.
Just to jump on that note, I think we've been seeing a longer lead time for large projects to be signed, something that we didn't see in the years leading up to 2022, but for 2023 and beyond, it just seemed to be taking longer and longer for some of these deals on both sides to be signed. And since the data was compiled, what's also been interesting is seeing how the geopolitical situation is affecting the demand. Number one, the uncertainty makes people stop and take a look at the entire landscape for an extended period of time. And then we had this really great wrench thrown at us in the last week and a half with GTA 6 coming out, you know, six to 7 months beyond their initial release date that was planned. And what's been interesting about that is that every time you've got a major change like that in the industry, oftentimes you'll find publishers wanting to fill that hole. We saw an interesting article on gamesindustry.biz a week ago stating that's not going to happen. Everything's going to be the same. But those of us that have been doing this for a while kind of know that that's going to be a little bit different. And just yesterday, Reuters posted an equal, or rather an opposing argument to that, saying publishers are already scrambling to start filling that hole that's been left by GTA 6, because why not seize that opportunity? So I think we're going to be seeing some we are starting to see an uptick in demand, and I think we may be seeing a bit of a scramble demand for some of those projects that thought they had more time in order to be able to get out, at least on the software development side. I can't quite speak to everything that's happening on the art side because that's a different area than we're spending a lot of our time in. But definitely we're seeing that that demand for engineering services start to increase. Definitely on the service provider side, not so much on the full SKU title side because everybody's still waiting to see what's happening with that before they fill the roster.
One thing that I'll add is just in terms of the sharp divide between optimism and pessimism. I think that, or you could call it realism, depending on what bucket you think things are in. So one thing that I did find was developer publishers seem to be a bit more optimistic, whereas service providers seem to be more realist or more pessimist, depending on how you look at it. So that theme, I think, has been throughout the report. I'm not sure, Carla, if you agree.
Yes, there is actually right next to that that graph that I was showing. It did indicate that the optimism is a little bit lower than on the service provider side than on the developer side. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. I was also thinking that, yeah, spend may be going up, of course, over the years since COVID. And I was wondering if the demand for, when it's saying that the demand for growth isn't as high as previous years, that doesn't necessarily mean that there'll be a dip in growth. It just means that there's not a perceived demand in it getting higher. So it could be a sign of like the market is a little bit more cautious. Everyone's kind of playing it by ear a little bit more. Everyone's trying to stick within the budgets they're given. So it could be a sign of caution, I think, as well, more than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Molly.
I was just going to say, to absolutely echo what you were saying. It does, and kind of build on what Nigel was saying about being in it long enough and kind of seeing the trends. I think that everybody, and especially when these surveys were taken, everybody was very much in that kind of wait and see approach. And now I think we're starting to understand a little bit more about what the landscape's going to look like. And with the GTA announcement, we know that there's a window until that title ships to maybe try and capitalize on. And so I think you're going to see, as we've started to see, people start jumping in, and then other companies will be like, oh, they're doing it, or other developers will be like, oh, okay, they're going for it, we'll go for it too, we'll take the risk. It feels really scary to take that risk when you're not seeing other companies do it, but when you start to see people doing it, then everybody starts jumping in. So I think that 6 months from now, if you were to take this same survey, I think your results would be a little bit more skewed in the, not necessarily positive, but a little bit more consistent with, okay, now we feel comfortable with growth, or we feel like we do see it returning back to sort of a normal business as usual, because we have a little bit more predictability around what's happening in the marketplace.
I totally agree. Like the market seems to be shifting and changing so quickly, but we're also gaining more understanding on how the market is starting to shape up. So keep your eyes peeled for next year's report, because it's going to be, it's going to keep changing. It's a very interesting one. So what I think we shall do now is we're going to take a look at the next slide that I had in mind. I'm going to go to slide 12. Here we go. I wanted us to take a look at why developers and publishers work with service providers. And this is always a great slide for me. So since over the past couple of years, flexible skill set and ramp up and ramp down has been the number one reason why developers and publishers work with service providers. And something that's moved into the top 2 slot since previous years is cost savings, and that is tied to building more content and features. And I wanted to ask the question of, well, the report highlights that developers primarily work with service providers for that increased flexibility and that content creation and those cost savings. But in today's financially cautious market, what cost-effective external development solutions and risk mitigation strategies have developers seen to be most effective? And then on the service provider side, I wanted to ask, what strategies can service providers put in place to benefit themselves and their clients? Anyone want to jump in?
I can jump in.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
I think one of the things from a service provider standpoint is definitely having a breadth of options to look at as opposed to just focusing on one particular area. So diversity is key. So if you do have a specialty, that's great, but being able to jump into a variety of diverse situations really, really helps. What specialization is often one of those things that as a service provider, we get asked for somebody that's got 25 years experience on a technology that's existed for about 6 months, that type of thing. Where basically we're looking, oftentimes buyers are looking for the needle on the haystack that's sitting on the back of a rainbow unicorn. So I totally understand that demand because that can often be in the job descriptions for people, but we found that having the flexibility of people with a wide range of skills to be able to jump into these situations quickly has been a tremendous, tremendous help and a big selling point for us. But also taking a look at that, just because buyers often tend to ramp up and ramp down, not having your entire strategy for a 5-year period tied into one particular deal that you're looking at. So being able to take a look at something where you know that you have to be able to ramp down quickly if the situation changes, and being able to transfer that to another team that also has high demand is really key. So diversity is really, really important. If you're sticking with 1 or 2 projects and you expect that to be a survival strategy for the future, that's going to be a little bit dangerous for you. Sorry, Abby, please jump in.
No, I mean, all of that is perfect. Perfect way to start. But I was gonna add a bit more on the you know, if we ask strategies that service providers can put in place to benefit themselves and clients, I think so cost effectiveness sometimes can get kind of overly associated with just rates, right? Like, are your rates competitive? And you know, we do see that in the report and all that. But I think the question of cost effectiveness has to do a lot with value and really kind of when you think about what the collaboration is able to and what the partnership is able to unlock or open up for, let's say, for the developer and publisher. I mean, when we think about, you know, one of the data points that you had just pointed out is building more content is still one of the key things that is being looked at. Meanwhile, obviously cost savings being kind of tied with it, right? So those two, I think one way that we can potentially look at the correlation is that there's you know, publishers and developers want to develop kind of develop more of what is already known, right? What is already safe. Games are already out there, right? Let's just build more. I mean, we just helped, for instance, with the Cyberpunk update, and that was a big one after they had said like, oh, this is our last big update, and then we helped them put out one more big one, right? And so that's the kind of thing where it's just like, okay, you know, trying to get more out of what is already known when while allowing your team to kind of move on right to the next thing. And so that's something that service providers can step up to do. But in order to do that, I think that it takes a lot more than it used to, right? We need to be able to offer value, meet our partners where they are, whether that's location, whether that's, you know, stepping out more in terms of really understanding their IP instead of just tell us what to do. It's more like, okay, no, we'll understand what you want to do so that we can take on more of the development from your team and offer more value that way. That way you get more bang for a buck in that regard, right? So I think there's a bit more of a role that the service providers need to do in terms of stepping into meet where developers are more, if that makes any sense, so that, yeah, the cost savings come from increased value, bang for buck.
Yes. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Carla.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say, speaking from the developer sort of publisher side and coming from a company with, the size of EA where we have a lot of different teams, that there's not one plan that fits all in terms of what their external strategy looks like. But in large part, I think that we've matured enough as a industry to recognize that cost and quality are not necessarily always completely compatible. And so based on the priority of your project, it may be that cost is really the priority. I need to get as much as I possibly can for as cheap or inexpensive, or whatever word you want to use, as I possibly can. But for a lot of them, it's, I need to get the best quality possible. It's very expensive internally to hire and train and maintain a regular full-time employee. So for that flexible skill set ramp that we talk about as being sort of that number one, or staying consistent year over year, is the number one need for service providers to be able to flex and scale, but also recognizing that there is some amount of money that we'll have to put out to do that, and we want to get the best quality possible. In terms of what we look for, there's a lot of like cost predictability. And so instead of just saying that it's going to be the least expensive, being able to work with the partners and to Abby's point, meet everybody where they need to be. And that's got to be the most difficult part, in my opinion, of being a service provider, is that you have to turn yourself into a pretzel for every different group that you're working with to try and accommodate what their needs are. But from our needs, it's not so much about necessarily being the cheapest or the least expensive. It's obviously that quality driver, and then being able to say, this is what we anticipate, creating like cost transparency and cost consistency for the length of the project as much as possible. And even if that means building into the negotiation to say, we're going to need to plan for a 1 to 2% rate increase every, year over year for the 3 years that we're doing this project, or whatever it is, but being able to kind of be upfront about what that looks like, so that when we're doing our year over year planning and we're doing our predictive models for our teams, we can give them clarity and consistency in what that cost is going to look like. And so I think a lot of the cost savings conversations for our part comes in where teams feel like, I'm working with this partner and now I'm a bit over a barrel because I have to continue to utilize them, but the costs keep go up and up, and that creates inconsistency in my mind. And I can't build my ramp planning and my future modeling unless I know what it's going to cost. So then that's kind of leads to that scary, like, well, if I have an internal RFT, I know what that's going to cost. If I have an external company, I'm kind of beholden to them and a little bit unpredictable in terms of what that looks like. So any sort of clarity that can be brought into that cost model, I think helps the developer publisher side to be able to be more consistent in building those longer term relationships with teams.
I totally agree. Like, I think that word predictability fits really well there with Abby's word of value as well. Like, for me, the two of those things go really, really well together. Like, value for me is going to be one of the big topics for XDS this year. Like, how can we utilize external development to bring more value to the games that we're making? Because games are big and expensive to make, and a lot of what goes into games is made externally. So what ways can we make our game development externally more predictable, and make our processes more efficient, more streamlined? What can we add to them to make things go quicker or more efficiently? And that's where the value comes in for me, like building that value by increasing the efficiency and sustainability of the way we're doing external development. So they're all great points. Thank you so much for bringing them to the table.
Yeah.
And no, go ahead.
I was just gonna add, like, just going off what you're saying, and then also Molly, like, you're talking about predictability and all that stuff. That kind of goes one more thing about it says something about building kind of long-term partnerships, right? And because I think investing in your partnerships to try and find efficiencies, right, along the way, as you develop that partnership, right? Like knowing how each other works. I think that's the kind of stuff as well that will translate to increased value, right? Like when the longer you work together, the better you get to know each other and your processes, and the more efficient you end up getting, right? And maybe you can collaborate on some creative solutions together. And I think that those kinds of partnerships end up being cost effective in the long run, besides just being good for just general, the partnership and the morale of the teams who do work together. I think will also have some sort of like, like practical benefit, right? Like when teams just work well together over time. But I think, yeah.
100% agree with that, Abby. That the one thing that my teams are kind of sick of hearing me say is remember that this is a relationship-based business. So as much as we're making good entertainment, really cool software, really great art, the relationships that those team members establish with the team members at their level will stick with them for their careers, right? It's really important because we end up working together as a full team, even though it may be 2 separate, 3 separate, or 5 separate companies or more. One title we looked at, we thought we were the only outsourcer. We found out there were just 6 other studios and keywords alone on this one, so we should have known better. But it's so important. And too many times, I actually heard one developer publisher say, it's just going to be really cool to have these conferences where I can talk to people and people don't just look at me like I'm a wallet, as opposed to coming out and giving new business, as opposed to trying to establish a relationship and understand what the actual needs are. Once those relationships are established, and there's an amount of mutual respect and integrity that's there, the options really open up for how you can really make that game come to life in a much more efficient way, because everybody gets familiar not only just with the pipelines and the technical side of things, which is really important, but how people actually work best together. And we've seen it in super high morale teams. Like these games come out, we're facing challenges throughout the development cycle, and these games come out and they're good and they sell well, and the teams want to work together again. And we know that from the publisher developer side, being for the most part public companies, there's a risk aversion there, right? So you don't want to have that risk of what is an unknown relationship going to be doing to this really great property that I want to be able to capitalize on as much as possible to sustain value for shareholders and value for players and everything that's important. So absolutely, that's super important. That adds to just the notion of we are helping create value for the publisher developer and for the gamer, because that's their end customer at the end of the day.
Awesome. And I want to continue this conversation of value, because this is a word that keeps bubbling up, not just in here, but in the industry as a whole, I'm feeling. I just want to say to the chat, if you have any questions that you want to start asking, we have a Q&A feature. Feel free to drop them in about 15 minutes. We'll go and start answering some of your questions. So I'm going to now share the screen on page 15 of the Insights report. This is the top criteria for developers and publishers when they want to go ahead and select external partners, and the top 3 things that they consider when selecting a partner for their projects. And what I wanted to do is just take a look at some of this data, because there have been some spikes or some dips this year compared to previous years. And I'd like us to have a little bit of a chat about what are some of the reasons or theories why this could be. So we see here there is a slight dip in quality of work being a top factor, although it is still the very, very tippy top thing that people are always looking for. The rate has risen this year as one of the top 3 factors. You see it's gone to above 50% of the people saying that this year. We've seen quite a dip in team skill sets. One of the other things here that's taken a peak this year is current established relationships. So that could go back to the factor about creating that predictability. But then also one that really spiked this year was security requirements. So that's another thing that we could have a chat about. So yeah, to the panel here, does anyone have any theories as to why some of these trends may have changed over the last year?
I wanted to just jump in on current established relationships, if I may. Kind of tying into the last kind of topic that we're talking about is as a buyer, wearing the buyer hat, You know, in a time of uncertainty and risk, I'm again echoing what you guys have talked about of leaning into established partnerships and who I've worked with well, how can we continue that going, signing more long-term contracts and those types of things. The question is though, am I able to, right? Do I have the mandate to do so? And so one thing I think is really interesting is that maybe this is a grand prediction. Is there maybe a bit of a reset, right? Like comparatively to COVID times when everyone was, you know, knife fighting for resources, now is a time where things are opening up a little bit more, right? So there might be a little bit of musical chairs in terms of some of these established partnerships may shift, right? And so I'm thinking that like if I was to be Nostradamus in terms of what's going to happen over these next couple of years, I think that you're going to see a race to reestablish those partnerships, and there'll be a golden age in terms of where these partnerships go, right? So, like, for example, there are studios that, you know, I would talk to that would have a 6-month waiting list to even consider starting something, right? And I didn't have that runway. Now, all bets are off, right? And so it's going to be very interesting to see who, going to Nigel's kind of the walking wallets, who are the people that are going to be able to put their money where their mouth is, establish those baselines, and able to run with those teams. So I think everyone is just courting and waiting for that other shoe to drop. So I'm very curious to see maybe something that we'll get more of a litmus test on in September in Vancouver. So.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. Let's see. Marley or Abby or Nigel, do you have anything else you want to add about how these trends are changing?
I think that certainly for us as a developer publisher, the current established relationship creates value for our teams in that we don't have to completely set up a new partner. And I think that that is one of our biggest sort of time constraint issues, or when we're talking to the different teams that we have within the company, they want to know who's already set up with, you know, the legal agreements, the connectivity, the security, all of those kinds of things. They've been through all of their due diligence. They've been through their security. And we already have deployment systems or tech set up in place. It's a known entity, it's a known quantity, so it makes it much faster to engage with those partners. So in terms of, I don't have a solution for partners that are out there and service providers in ways that they can potentially sort of get established and get all of that stuff done, because I know it's a cost for them to do that. If they're not going to just come to us and spend, you know, however long it is out of their own pockets to set themselves up in our systems, just on the promise that there may be some work from that down the road. But that is typically why we end up going with a current established relationship, is because of I need this and I need it tomorrow. Who do you have that's available that I don't have to go through all of the setup and the process setup with? The other piece that I did see on this that was interesting to me was the financial stability piece really spiking. And I don't know if that has to do, it's curious to me that financial stability and security both really spiked. And I was kind of really curious as to what trends Abby and Nigel and the rest of the providers were seeing in those requests, because that was an interesting element to me, that obviously both of those are significantly higher than they were in the past.
Yeah, I'm thinking that the security requirements could be, you know, coming off of, you know, folks really leaning into distributed development, right? Like, I know we've been at this work from home thing for a while, but I think it might be coming from, you know, developers coming around to, oh, okay, do we need to make adjustments into and how we are collaborating with these distributed teams? We are seeing some, I suppose, let's call it awkwardness in this transition, where it's just like, okay, you know, because we have our own distributed teams, obviously, we're a global company, and then various levels of distributedness also within there. Some folks are completely work from home and some are in studios. And I think developers who maybe their whole team is work from home. Okay, what are our policies? Let's do a little bit of a reassessment of what we're doing internally, and see if, like, how does this apply to our partners who maybe they are still putting under the old, before work from home and distributed was much more acceptable, doing that sort of analysis, like, okay, yeah, maybe now you can work from home, but what does that look like? So maybe they're revisiting some of those, like, audits, revisiting some of those things. And the financial stability, I think, is probably just a if there's volatility on the buyer side, I would assume that they want to make sure that the partners that they're working with are not facing equal volatility, to kind of like magnify that. So just like, okay, we want to make sure that, and maybe that also like ties into the long-term relationships, right? Like, we're seeing a little bit of more interest in, hey, how are we going to work together long term? Even just these questions being asked, and more openness from our partners to be like, okay, we're going to show you a little bit more under the hood on our side so that you can help us build longer term things, or you can anticipate our needs better. And all of that stuff, I think, kind of ties into that, where, okay, if we're going to invest in this partnership, we want to know that we're investing with the right folks. So I think maybe financial stability and the security kind of like tie in a little bit to that.
These are excellent points that Abby, Molly, and David have made on this. What I think is interesting is that we've seen pendulum swings over the last 5 years, right? So pendulum swing from no one would ever allow remote work to suddenly we all have to do that, and everybody scrambled like mad to be able to make that happen. Well, we all remember what March 2020 was like, thinking this is okay. So we got initial stories that this is only going to be for a month, 6 weeks. Anybody that's been through these types of large changes before knows that this is a multi-year event. As part of this multi-year event, we saw massive spikes in demand for games. Great, because everybody's playing from home. We all grew like there was no tomorrow, and suddenly everybody's working from home. We're hiring people from Antarctica. Well, not really, but close enough. It kind of felt that way, right? But the pendulum's now swung the other way. We've seen that there's been some pressure on profitability for a lot of companies around the world. And then we had the layoffs start happening in 2022, 2023, 2024. And hopefully now we're seeing an end to that as we go through this period of recovery. But during all that, that's volatility. That's volatility from a management standpoint of how you run your publisher, developer, or vendor for development services. And along with that volatility coming to a close, excuse me, is the idea that now that you know what your staff count is like, you can start concentrating on some of the things that you haven't quite taken a look at. And I can tell you, a lot of publishers, not because of due to negligence or anything like that, but they slacked on security requirements, and now they're understanding that this is really important. But so we've done the big change. We met those security requirements. We go through our own yearly audits, and then we didn't have those yearly audits for a while from multiple publishers because there was so much volatility happening at the publisher themselves from a staffing requirement. So now we're seeing an upswing in that requirement, and it's super important. The fact that the pedal was taken off the gas for that is extremely concerning when it comes down to the safety of user data, our data, IP security, these kinds of things. And so it's really good to see that now there's a higher concentration on that. And I think we're going to continue seeing that into this year. So that's an interesting way to look at that spike. But one thing I do want to point about the top 3 factors is that quality of work and rates are still #1 and #2. So while there's a slight dip, that's still super important, and quality of work is still at the top end of that. So it's really easy to have somebody come in and say, I can do this for you at 1/2 the price. And it's caveat emptor, man. Like, you get what you pay for when it comes down to that, because sometimes we've had to take over projects where, a certain publisher has said in a contract, you must meet certain requirements for the lines of code that you have to develop over time. And this is how long you have before you do your first commit. And we're just like, either you trust us with this work or you don't. And we had a conversation about it, and they said, well, we had a problem with another provider where, they sold us the A team and they supplied us the B team and the C team. It's like, okay, great. Well, we get it. Let's talk this through and figure this out. But we cannot just have these requirements for people like this laid out like that, because that's not how good engineers work. Is that how your engineers work internally? I know the answer is no, because I used to work there. So it's more a matter of just having that really good conversation about what the actual needs are. So quality of work still remains a considerable factor. And it definitely is that way for us. We heard that at GDC as well. People telling us like, okay, rates is one thing, we'll have that discussion, but when you're pitching to us, make sure you're putting your best foot forward at the top quality work that you've done when you're putting together just a portfolio of what you've done, or what you'd like to propose for us to do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all those comments. I totally agree with everything that's been said. I think just drawing a close on that question, I think that that security requirement spike has I think something we should all pay attention to. As we've mentioned in this chat, it's becoming more and more important. I think that it's also important for service providers to, if they do have the luxury to be able to go through the time it takes to go through those security requirements and the onboarding that is required of these bigger developers, keep on building on those relationships during that time. Because if you can get all of those security requirements done and all of that due diligence, it just puts you in a stronger position for being selected as a service provider when the time comes around. So keep on building those relationships. It's really, really important. Okay, so I'm going to just leave the floor open for 3 more minutes or 4 more minutes, maybe, before we start the Q&A. So if anyone has any questions for the Q&A, drop those in now. What I wanted to finish the panel with is, does anyone have any key takeaways that they want to bring to the group from the report?
Gen AI is a fad, and it's never going to kick in. No, it's from the report and some of the data that came from the report as well. I think that ignoring the Gen AI side is going to be obviously to your detriment. Everybody's doing it. The question is at what level and how do we find the path through that? Because some publishers will say use it, and others will say use it in everything except for our commercial product, because we don't know what the legal ramifications are. And every developer on the floor is asking, how is this going to be affecting my job? And every manager is asking, how are we going to be effective at using this? And it's still a wide array of questions about this that have to be discussed at both the developer and the supplier level too.
I would say for me, and maybe just really emphasizes how XDev is now a non-negotiable for projects going forward, as in with the rise of costs and those cost concerns, and obviously North America is not getting cheaper. That's just something that is part of every single plan. And I'm curious to actually hear from Abby and Nigel if there's teething as a result of that. Are there people entering the sphere now that you guys have never dealt with before that are just learning? And I'm wondering if that's, there's people that are more advanced, people that have done some, and there's people who are brand new that are being thrust into this realm. I'm curious if you guys are experiencing that.
I think there is a little bit of that for sure. I mentioned there earlier, we've been getting some kind of reach outs about, hey, how do we work together better? Like some partners that we've worked with before that are now approaching for different things or more coming to us earlier. We've seen this trend of actually where they're coming to us in pre-production, for instance, whereas before that was we didn't touch pre-production, right? And I think it all speaks to everything we were talking about, with value and establishing long-term partnerships. I think a lot of devs and publishers are kind of like savvy to this, and like this is how we lower risk by investing long-term. And we are seeing for us, obviously, I think the report in some ways validates some of the observations that we've had because of that, right? Like this rebalancing of the industry with what we're seeing with this volatility, we feel external development has a huge part to play in this, right? Because there are going to be jobs. It's just a question of where they're going to be, which side they're going to be, right? And I think if we embrace that possibility, and the sooner we do, and external developers also step up to that, like offering new services or leaning into the increased demands in some areas that maybe they haven't been offering before, like for instance, pre-production and stuff like that. And even offering that kind of like training, as David was saying, you know, hey, how do we work together? Hey, we've never done this with you before. And being a bit more, okay, this is, you know, we've learned from our other experiences. We can help you, walk you through it and set this up. I think that that's all really kind of important for us as service providers to think about, helping them cross, so to speak, like make that leap. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome. Go ahead,
really
Molly.
wrap up the key takeaway. If I look at that, if I look at page 15, as we've kind of gone to, even though, if you look at the last 5 years, even though we went through a massive surge of uncertainty, and then we went through a massive boom of gaming, as Nigel pointed out, and then we've kind of gone into this new period of financial uncertainty. If you look across, the core tenets are still basically the same. So even though we've had all of this crazy 5 years of uncertainty, it still comes down to that piece, that quality, what you're spending for that quality, and then trying to create as much predictability around the craziness, but recognizing that the things that were important are still important. And you might every once in a while get a spike like security requirements or financial stability, but for the most part, it still comes back to that quality, predictability, and relationship. And I think that's at least gives us something grounded to hold on to say when we're going forward and making choices, still leaning into those things. They were true 5 years ago, they're still true today. We can at least use that as a foundation.
Thank you so much. We're going to end the panel there, move into some awesome questions that we've started getting in from the audience. Thank you, everyone, so far. I've really enjoyed the conversation. We have a question here from Julian Ludwig. Hey, Julian. Since 2020, external development has shifted quite a bit, with a wave of new players entering the space of service development. As leaders in outsourcing/vendor management, how have you adapted to these changes, and what qualities or red flags do you look out for when evaluating these new entrants?
I'll jump in first. While I understand Nigel's comments about flexibility, one thing that I look for is studios being able to correctly self-assess on what their specialization is. So what is their, if I'm starting any new partnership, I want that partnership to be successful just as much as they do. So how do we minimize risk? How do we do that is we start with your best thing, right? Like, tell me what you can do with your eyes closed, right? And that's the point of entry. That's the first impression. That's how we establish the relationship. So I think first and foremost is being able to self-assess and knowing what they're good at. And I can see it and I can echo that and feel confident in it.
I also think unique selling points is kind of interesting as well. Like, what makes you as a service provider stand out among others, and where do you bring that additional value that you can bring back to my project that I'm working on to make it even more special, make it more efficient, or I want to know about those things that makes you extra awesome as well. That's important for me too. Anyone else want to add anything to that question? Any red flags that we want to chat about? Okay, we'll go to another one. I've got another one here from Sam Carlisle. Hey, Sam. With the desire for trusted, known partners, do you think there will be a new wave of acquisitions as known large suppliers acquire smaller ones to further consolidate the market?
What a great question. Speaking from the 800-pound gorilla of acquiring service providers at Keywords, that is very much, it's very much part of Keyword strategy and has been for some time. the fact is, though, that the market continues to grow. There continues to be good service providers out there, and acquisition is definitely a significant part of Keyword's entire strategy for growth. And Keyword isn't the only company doing this. We saw several companies and service provider side doing this, and it really adds to the flexibility and what can actually be provided to a developer publisher for the range of services. I can't see that slowing down in any predictable future at this point, because the games business will continue to grow. Yes, it will grow at different rates, but just looking back over the 20-year trend, it's really the only way forward, because more games are being made, more people are playing them, and more companies are needed to be able to service them. And as such, those companies, whether they're oftentimes starting off as 2 or 3 people or 10 people or 20 people working together, in order to be able to grow, sometimes they won't be able to do the type of IT security audit that a large company can. And this is precisely the situation that we ran into with our studio in Ottawa. We had explosive growth because suddenly we had the ability to be able to handle larger projects where it becomes very difficult to go through a security assessment from the Ubisofts, the EAs, the Microsofts of the world. Whereas with a large infrastructure, suddenly we don't have to worry about that because the infrastructure is taken care of, and then we can focus on that business building relationship. As a small company, that's very challenging to do, very expensive, and it takes you away from doing the things that you're really good at, which is making good art, making good audio, doing great features, great design, and writing good code for games. So I think we're going to continue seeing that for sure into the future.
Yeah, I think on our side, we also, I think, see, or I also see it continuing, because at Virtuos, we just acquired 3 new studios in the West in the past year, and that's part of a strategy that we see. But in response to this whole, what I mentioned about meeting our partners where they are, right, their needs, it has to do. There was a data point earlier about, or there's a data point in the report about location and logistics being a big consideration, right, for publishers when choosing partners. And that's something that we are very much aware of. It's logistics and everything. Time zones have always been a factor, and I think we've all collectively been very good at it, those of us who've been doing it for a while, at adapting. But ultimately, especially as needs kind of deepen and these partnerships deepen, we do know that there is a need to have increased local support. That's part of why the group that I am director of exists. That's part of why we are acquiring these local studios, because we know that, sure, yeah, we can continue, these partnerships are across the oceans, but we would have more meaningful engagements and more collaborative engagements if we're able to meet you with more local support. And so I think that, at least on our side, part of our strategy is just responding to that. So it's not this like major acquisition play. And I certainly hope that people aren't just doing these like gobble up, studios, just without any strategy, because that does have some downsides too. Like, you want to make sure that things are solid and what value what value this, say, like acquisition or expansion is going to get you, right? Whether it's opening a new location or anything like that. But I do think it is going to continue, just because, yeah, we need to meet our partners where they are, and if that means increasing our locations, then that's something that we're going to do.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to another question here. We've only got 5 minutes left, so we'll cram in as much as we can. We've got one here from Anil Bola. Hello, team. I'm from Little Red Zombie Studio, India. As a service provider, we've always focused on adding value to the developers we've partnered with over the years. Given the challenges the industry is currently facing, we'd like to ask, is there a more structured and empathetic approach we can adopt to better understand the pain points our partners are experiencing, so we can be more supportive and collaborative in navigating this period together?
In terms of like structured and empathetic approach, I think Abby touched on this quite a bit, like throughout the discussion today, which is really that whole meeting partners where they are, understanding the the intent of what the developer is trying to achieve by externalizing the work, and then being able to be realistic and clear. And I know you guys are great at this, but being able to be realistic and clear about what you could do to support them, how you can help them, and giving, some suggestions around why I say going to the intent, because you may be able to offer something that they haven't had working with a different partner before in terms of your structure or your process or anything that you're doing. And so being able to understand the intent of what they want to achieve, and then you guys as the experts in that area being able to offer, share with them what it is you can offer them, but just building that relationship, building that collaboration, and being, which you guys are already doing, but just being really open in terms of what you can and can't do, and how you can partner with them as a real partnership, as opposed to just being a service provider for them.
That's a really great answer. Anticipation is a huge one if you can, and also just pointing out blind spots as well. Like a lot of us like to think that we've got everything covered. Sometimes it's good to kind of have that humbling moment that you don't, and having someone that you trust be able to kind of call it out. Because one thing I've found is, with being a more of a central team now, I see more of a bigger, broader aspect of how different people engage. But if I'm project centric, then I don't have that ability to see broadly, like what is best practices in this area. And service providers have seen it, and they're able to really help in those areas.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We've probably got time for one more question. Let me see. Okay, Julian Castano. I read the report and find interesting the fact that publishers rank the quality of work at the top when looking for an external partner. But on the flip side, service providers rank at number one how much potential clients can pay over some other qualitative criteria that would speak more to partnership. I'm aware and aligned with what Nigel said, that you get what you pay for. Same as cheaper is not better, and neither it is expensive, but would love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so it's a balance, right? It really depends on what level you are with your studio and how you're approaching all of your deals. So, for example, you know what your cost structure is and figure out what your required margins are. And there's always going to be pressure from whoever you're selling to. But at the same time, you want something where you feel that everybody can walk away with a good feeling that they, A, haven't left money on the table, B, don't feel like they've been taken advantage of, and C, feel like they can work with you for a long time. So you have to have that flexibility. There's some great courses on negotiation that talk about, what's your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or your zone of a potential agreement, all these things like that, ZOPA, BATNA, et cetera. But really it boils down to you have your top end, you have your mid-range, you have your bottom end for how you want to position yourself as a studio. But you also have to make decisions strategically, saying, I'm okay reducing my price for the value of this long-term client, potentially, right? So it's very difficult to say that there's just one answer that fits all, because it really depends where you are with your own growth planning, your own revenue planning. But really the key is, if you end up landing this particular client for a rate that is not as high as what you would have wanted to achieve from a profitability standpoint, is that still value to you strategically? Because it's going to allow you to close different contracts, work with different parts of that same provider, gain a reputation, establish those relationships as somebody that can provide good work and that's trustworthy. And that's something that we always take a look at when we're taking a look at our deals. It's not a matter of like, oh, let's see how much we can possibly get out of this particular client. I mean, that's crazy. So being able to focus on the quality of the work, and then having the rates as a consideration, but not the highest consideration. Obviously, we have pressure, but we're part of a big company as well. They want us to perform at the same time. But regardless, we have to be in a position where we can still maintain those relationships and be able to flex on pricing when it's needed in order to be able to bring a particular deal home. And particularly so that we know that we're going to be still working with this partner in 2, 3, or 8 years' time. It's super important.
And just really quickly going off on that, I think if I were to speculate, one of the drivers for that answer on the service provider side is, when potential partners come in and say, like, we just want you to do this for cheap, right? What's the lowest rate that you can bid for us, right? And I think the service providers I would hope, want the opportunity to prove that, hey, we are worth, more than that. Like, we can provide value, and if you are willing to invest in this, and we're willing to invest and show you that we can offer value. Now, obviously, that comes with the challenge for service providers to actually step up and offer that value when it comes to that. But I think there's a little bit of a, if we're coming in hot saying like, give us the cheapest that you can do, then we're probably not off to a good, strong partnership, and that might be a factor in driving that response. So.
Thank you so much. We are at time. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking part. I'm going to keep on saying that word value is a huge one at the moment. I can't wait to continue the conversation at XDS about this. So I hope to see you all there soon. And sorry to those we didn't get around to answering the questions for. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weeks, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
See everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.